So tell me a little bit about Numeral. What do you guys do? Yeah,
Yeah, Numeral is an accounting automation platform that specifically focuses on revenue recognition and transaction level cash reconciliation. So for most folks, probably most listeners, most of the audience are not CPAs or accountants. So let me just explain very simply what the technology does. Are you familiar with any like personal finance apps like formerly Mint, Empower,
sure. Yeah. Yeah, I've
Money?
used Mint before. Yeah.
Me too. I use Mint. That was my favorite personal finance app tool before it got discontinued.
Yeah.
Essentially, those tools give you a view of your net worth in real time, right? It plugs into your brokerage accounts, your bank accounts, your mortgages, your loans, and it gives you a view of your net worth. We do that for businesses, except instead of, a net worth, I guess, view, we show the P&L and balance sheet, which is the net worth for a business. So yeah, very simple. You can think of Numeral as like a Mint or Empower or Rocket Money for a business. More specifically on the accounting side, we handle revenue recognition and transaction level cash reconciliation, though.
So who are like competitors here? So like I'm assuming that companies have a lot of this stuff or had to have a lot of this stuff. Like what are you guys doing differently than like I guess we probably use NetSuite or something else like that, right?
Well, NetSuite is a general ledger. We're a revenue sub.
Fair.
So,
I
there's
see. Okay.
multiple layers to this, right? So at the very top layer is your general ledger, which,
Okay.
you start with QuickBooks and then graduate to a NetSuite and then eventually Oracle, Workday, SAP. Below a general ledger is going to be subledgers, right? So the revenue subledger for our companies is Numeral, right? Like
I see.
our expense subledger is ramp, right? All a subledger
I
is
see.
all the granular details about a specific area of accounting. So the general
Sure.
level, all the summary level information, all the uh, everything totaled up, and then yeah, the subledger is
Cool.
just details.
Yeah. So talk to me about your story. So, I think it's so one of the things I always like to learn about is, what was kind of the founding journey for you? Like was this primarily like I want to be a founder at some point, I want to, start a company at some point, and I think you have even before this, but or was it like this idea that I have, like, it needs to be done and I'm going to be the one to do it.
Yeah,
Like, was it a pull of being kind of your own boss, your own owner, a startup founder? Was it the pull of the idea more?
yeah. I think a lot of entrepreneurs like have some type of itch, right? That needs to
Yeah.
be scratched at some point. And a lot of entrepreneurs, and I made the same mistake, you just want to scratch the itch and you just want to
Yeah.
start a company. And I did that for my first company, which was a B2C company. And that was a long, drawn out failure, which was a great learning experience, right? But for my next company, what I wanted to do is, hey, what is the area that I'm really passionate in, where I just don't see a business opportunity? And secondly, where am I very strong in? So the intersection of both those is Numeral, where essentially accounting is just personal finance for businesses, and personal finance is my biggest passion outside of work. It's what I'm most interested in. It was what I was most obsessive about outside of work. And then B2B software sales is my entire career. So I was like, hey, what's at the intersection of that? Well, it's selling to businesses and selling accounting software, accounting automation software. So that was the genesis for the idea for Numeral. I used to previously work at other startups that sold in the accounting and finance space as well, so I learned a little bit there. But yeah, very simply, the genesis for Numeral is like, hey, personal finance is my biggest passion outside work. The equivalent for personal finance in business is accounting. I have all this experience in B2B software and growing B2B software teams. Let's put that together.
Yeah, that's cool. What was the process to come up with the idea? Was this kind of like a, hey, I'm going to start a company, I want to like, actively brainstorm this idea, or did it come to you at some point?
No, it did not. It wasn't like an aha moment. It was kind of just
Sure.
like over actually a couple of years that it initially started formulating, and then it just simmers in your brain, and then at some point it's like, oh, an opportunity comes about where it allows you to actually start a company and allows you to actually, you know, test the waters, right? But no,
Sure.
it's not like a aha, oh, wake up one day, oh, I have this.
Yeah.
No, no, it was simmering for quite some time because I've been an early user of Mint since right after I graduated college, way back in 2013, and um, yeah, my accounting experience, accounting B2B SaaS experience was started in 2018.
Cool. What's what was the early days like? So you have the idea, you're ready to kind of go about this. Like what was the early team like? What was the early product like? What was that kind of those first few months?
It was absolute grind. I think being a founder is glorified, right? It's
Sure.
everyone wants to be a founder, but you probably don't really want to be a founder.
Sure. Yeah.
Of work and shit that goes into it. Yeah, there are times where you're just doing things, pulling insane hours in living out of a car, stuff like that, like crazy stuff to just get it off the ground so that you're working 7 days a week and you're just solely focused on this startup. Um, yeah, there are sacrifices you have to make, especially I mean, when we started the company, we started like pretty bad time, right? It was like kind of where there wasn't much funding and it was not the best environment. So you just gotta, that's even better, right? That's even better environment because if you can sell in a recession, you can sell in a downturn, I mean, you can do it anytime, right? So it's just a lot of grinding, a lot of hard work, but that's
What
nothing.
gave you the confidence that you were on to the right thing, given all of the sacrifice and grind and hard work that was kind of in front of you?
I think once you sell a customer and they're willing to pay you money up front and the software is not even like finished,
Yeah.
right? Like if they're that excited about it, like generally speaking, companies will not pay up front. They want to pay monthly or they want to pay you when it's done. But to have a company say, hey, I'm willing to pay you this much upfront, this is this much of a pain for me. And because of that, I'm going to pay you upfront and I believe in you, I trust in you and build it for me.
Yeah.
So when you have that level of investment from your early customers, and these aren't small deals, by the way, these are our ACV right now is 49K. Um, that says a lot and that gives you a lot of confidence and obviously that builds up.
What was that strategy like in terms of, so did you go out to try to sell to customers before the product was finished? And like, what were you showing them to get them excited at that point?
I think there are different types of founders, right? So there's founders that are like a product background who probably will
Yeah.
just mainly focus on building a product first, get it to a certain degree, and then sell it. I
Yeah.
come from a sales background. So my background has always been in B2B enterprise sales. And with that, it's going to be, hey, here are wireframes, or here's the vision for the product. Here's the initial UI. This is what it will do. This is what it does right now, realistically. This is what it can do later on. And this is the gap. And do you believe that we can fill this gap? Do you believe that we can build this for you? Uh, that's kind of how we approached it at the start.
Did you have like, so you were did you have like engineering team before you were starting to sell this, or is it you and a co-founder, or like, how did you guys start? Like, yeah, how was it working?
Yeah, no, I had a technical co-founder at the time,
Okay.
and yeah, they helped build the initial MVP, the initial wireframes, the initial designs, and then I
And
know
then you were selling at that point.
we sold our first product within exactly 3 months. I remember
That's cool.
once
Yeah.
of when we
No,
started.
this is fascinating for me because I'm definitely the product and engineering co-founder type. I just want to go build a thing versus like, it's like, yeah, once it's good enough, we'll start selling it. But it's, that's always the difference.
There are pros and cons to both, right?
Of
And
course. Yeah. Yeah.
it's just, yeah, it's just a matter of setting expectations straight with your customers on
Yeah.
what to deliver.
When you were trying to build this out, like, was there uncertainty in can we deliver the product in as kind of described? Was it like more of a market risk or versus a technological risk?
Yeah, I'll say both.
Okay.
Maybe because from a technological perspective, like to say you can handle tens of millions of transaction lines a month, you just don't know. You just don't know until you actually get it ingested in your system. So it was a risk in that way, and we obviously convinced our customers saying, like, yes, we can, we
Yeah.
will, we can, and they believed us and they gave us opportunity, which we're very grateful for. And then the market risk in the sense of like, yeah, like we just a lot of things like we don't know you don't know exactly you don't know what you don't know and you don't know a lot of times like how it's going to go and like
Yeah.
we'll sell a software we'll sell a services and we're selling that because a customer asked for it saying like hey I want XYZ and I think a lot of a startup is just finding out what the customer is willing to pay for and trying to build it in real time while they've paid for it, like even though
Yeah.
you don't, right? So it's just a level of like how aggressive you want to approach it and and what's the and like I said, coming from a sales background and not a product background, I think my approach was more sales centric, yeah,
Okay.
which said has its pros and cons.
Yeah. How big is the company? I mean, how many people do you guys have on the team now?
Entire company size right now is 12 people.
12 people. And how did it grow over the few years? Like it was you and a co-founder, and then who did you add on? Like who were the first early hires and what were they doing?
First early hires were obviously engineers. Like for such a data intensive platform like Numeral, it's yeah, all of our early hires were engineers. We didn't hire our first not engineer until I think it was 14 months in.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hired our first not engineer 14 months in, which was a marketing person.
And how did you find those early engineers? Was it network? And how did you convince them, like, hey, this is a hugely risky thing, might not work. Like, what was the strategy to get them excited about something like this?
Yeah, one of my mentors told me the way you can recruit and get somebody to believe in your vision and your idea is you need to first believe it yourself. If you don't, it will be very easy to tell, and your employees and your prospective employees that you're trying to recruit will be able to tell that very quickly. So I think it's having very, very high conviction in your idea, having some initial signals that tell you, hey, this is there's something here. Like I said, with customers paying up front and signing some pretty big contracts.
Mm,
Um, and then after that, the rest take cares of itself. Like when you chat with these candidates, they can hear it and they can feel it in your voice when you chat with them, right? On if you're bullshitting them or not, because at the end of the day, it is a huge risk, right? 90% of startups fail,
yeah.
and uh, yeah, it's not for everyone.
What's also opportunity costs and stuff like that. Like, a lot of good engineers are like can make quite a bit of money, and you're likely taking a pay cut working at an earlier stage company. So, were there things that outside of just being really compelling with the pitch that you guys tried to do to like get them excited?
I think it's almost like not reverse psychology, but basically telling them very candidly, like, hey, what are you trying to optimize for? If it's
Mm,
optimizing for money, don't come here. We
yeah,
like you don't want to come here and it's not the best fit, and you should go to Amazon, you should go to
yeah,
Google. But if you are, a couple years in your career and you have saved up a nice little buffer for yourself and you want to see what it's like at a super early stage startup and get that experience, because eventually I hope you start your own company, then come here, right? I
right,
can't compete with Amazon or Google on salary, but I can compete with them on ownership, on experience, on equity stake, on impact, right? So yeah, if a candidate is optimizing for just salary, not the right fit, just
right,
candidate. You don't even want them
yeah.
there.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. It's funny. Like every time we've tried to recruit somebody that was also interviewing at big tech, it never worked. Like
Yeah.
almost never worked. Because like it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get 500K total comp. Can you compete with that? It's like, dude, like just go take that job then.
The answer to that. So this is something we learned pretty quickly is like you bucket candidates into certain areas, and if they are interviewing with just startups, that's a good sign. That's a good
Yeah.
early. If they're
Yeah.
just trying to find a job interviewing everywhere, probably not the most ideal fit.
Yeah. You talk to me a little bit about like, especially with that early team, it's like you're bringing on kind of the core of your company in a lot of ways. Like, how did you guys think about interviewing and hiring? And like, you're a founder, but you've had a pretty long career already before that, so I'm sure you've picked up things along the way.
Yeah. You're not gonna like this answer.
Okay.
Not gonna like this answer because when we were initially starting out, because we sold very quickly and because our software wasn't like built quickly enough or wasn't like fully built out, and it was just like, hey, this is the vision, this is what we're gonna build, let's sell it and then let's build it in real time. We did a bad job of vetting for initial engineers. We essentially hired folks we shouldn't have hired, and we did this too because we wanted to build this platform as soon as possible, right, as quickly as possible. So we didn't really vet for culture. We didn't really vet for, hey, do we think this person will last at least 2 years with us, right? Like 2 years at a startup is a pretty good amount of time. So our four out of the first five engineers we hired, eventually we parted ways with, like, and that was a really good lesson that I've learned that hopefully your listeners don't learn that way, where even if you have hard deadlines from customers, even if you're very, very pressed from an engineering technical perspective to build something quickly, don't hire folks you don't see having an actual future potential there. We pretty much just hired anybody who was a decent coder very quickly at ASAP because we were just scrambling from day nine, like I said, from when we sold our first piece of software 90 days in.
No, it's very interesting because I think I think you can go both ways. Like I think if you can go too slowly too, right? And I think like a lot of companies have this failure where they're looking for a perfect unicorn
Yeah,
and they wait like really, really long because they're just like, oh, I'm this, I need, they need to check all the boxes, they need to be perfect and everything else. And I think personally, at least in my career, I found that like, there obviously you don't want to be super fast and throw people in, but also you need to be able to take chances on people. Because if you're looking to bat 100 every single time, like
yeah,
I don't know, you're never gonna like you're gonna miss out on someone with high potential, I guess, is always the interesting thing that I've always found. So being able to then say, like, okay, well, we'll give people a shot and let them move on if it doesn't work out, I think is a nice way of thinking about it.
yeah.
For those engineers, like what was the thing that didn't work out? Was it like culture? Was it like, hey, they didn't have the mindset required? Was it just engineering ability? Like, or at least, I mean, just as a broad generalization, not particularly on any individual.
Three out of the four that didn't work out was because they simply didn't have the hustle, grit, and work ethic to be at an early stage, seed stage, pre-seed stage startup.
How did you go from like, so you had some signals, so how have you kind of adapted your process kind of going from there to like check for these things?
Yeah, now we're in a different stage, right? Right. At this
Right,
point,
sure.
we raised a total of 4 million in funding, and we have customers in which we've communicated, hey, these are the timelines. Like we're not going to overpromise something ridiculous that we may have done, just very
Yeah.
super early in the company. So no, we certainly, I don't want to say take our time, but we are finding the right fits. And also it helps to work with um, recruiters and headhunters you trust that forward you folks in their network. For example, our most recent engineering leader we hired was from a friend of mine in network she's a headhunter, and yeah, it's we've certainly fine-tuned that process over the years, as opposed to just initially it was just hiring somebody who was a passes a if they're a 7 out of 10 or above, we hire them because we needed the bodies so fast,
Yeah.
which
Outside
was
of like building the product where I'm sure you put a lot of thought into and potentially sell and obviously selling the product. Like what about your company do you spend a lot of time thinking about? Like, the way you hire, the culture that you're building, like what is kind of like what runs the cycles in your head? Like what do you want to be thoughtful about?
the biggest thing that's going through my head these days right now is how I make my technology more self-serve, how we more of a self-serve technology. Because right now, our customers rely on us during implementations, and rightfully so, because we handle very sensitive information and very important processes that if they get wrong, they can't fundraise or they fail audits, all that kind of stuff. And uh, it's as companies mature, like generally speaking, if you're selling in more upmarket like this, it's fine where you're a bit of a professional services element, kind of a services SaaS business. But as time goes on, you think about more of, hey, how can we make this more of a true SaaS play, where once you sell the software, they can swipe their credit card theoretically and just use it. And that's the that's what's running circles around my head these days.
Yeah.
As we're 2 years in, and we've proven that there's a bunch of these customers that want and need our solution, and now it's just optimizing for truncating the implementation timeline to where ideally there is no implementation. But that's a work in progress, because essentially what we're doing is building software that's as scalable as a database, but as flexible as a spreadsheet. And if you're trying to do that, it takes some time to build a product where it's flexible as a spreadsheet.
Yeah. How do you think about kind of the lessons you've learned along the way in terms of like, let's say you go start another company, and if, maybe if this works really, really well, and then you decide to start something else, what would you try to take with you if you go start something else, or, you want to give advice to your past self?
Yeah. I think my biggest takeaway from my experience starting a company is think about how long it's taking you to do something, or the team to do something, and have a very clear set expectation of doing that in a fourth of the time. So
Mhm.
uh, one of my mentors shared this to me, saying, if we're at the start of a race and I tell you you're about to run a marathon, you're gonna start jogging when we shoot the gun and the gun goes off. But if I
Right.
tell you it's a 100-meter sprint, you're gonna sprint your ass off right off the start. So if you approach every day as if you're sprinting the 100-meter sprint, then you can just get a lot more done, and just get a lot more done faster than you or your team expects it to. So I think it's also just a matter of like Yeah, your viewpoint and how you think about that, your mentality with that. That's the biggest takeaway for me. Where anybody starting a company, it's really think about, hey, can I approach this as if it's a 100-meter race as opposed to a marathon? If I approach it like that, where if I'm not holding back, I'm not jogging, I'm just sprinting right up the gate all the time, you'll see a difference in what you get done.
How do you hold your team accountable to something like that, or like, or inspire that in your team? Especially, you're a kind of business focused founder. Most of your early teams probably engineers, like you mentioned. Like, how do you make sure that you're pushing that, but also being, somewhat realistic?
That's a hard balance, right? And that's not I think one way that we do it, the one way that I do it here at Numeral is, so we have all these shared Slack channels with all of our customers, and whenever they ping us, literally like at the early onset of the company, I don't do it anymore because we have folks that handle that now, but we had an SLA of 30 seconds. As in like if somebody, which is basically just symbolism for, hey, this is the speed in which we operate.
Sure.
Literally, if somebody pinged us anything, it doesn't matter if it's just saying, hey, I got your question, I'll address it. Or, hey, I got your question, we're looking into it right now, we'll get back to you by end of day today. Literally an SLA of 30 seconds. So you can imagine how that would look to like, positively to a customer as well as internally to the team. Like, oh, our founder CEO is that on top of it. So I think that's a good sign that gives a signal to your team like, hey, this you're about this.
Makes a lot of sense. Like this is like clear actions and embodying those actions yourself is pretty interesting. I just have a random tactical question from me, which is like, how did you maintain the ability to like be on top of Slack that much to be able to do that? Like, were you sending text notifications to yourself? Did you have like notifications turned on? Like, what was the
No, it's just you never have notifications turned off, which is not healthy. But hey,
fair enough?
starting a startup is not healthy,
Fair
right?
enough. Fair
It,
enough. Yeah, that's cool. Is that also a value of Numeral? Basically, just being extremely responsive to customers. Like,
when you are an early stage startup, there are certain disadvantages you have, right? And advantages you have. Like disadvantages are, I don't have the budget like an Oracle. I don't have the brand awareness like an Oracle. But the advantages we have as a startup is when you ask me to do something, I will do it immediately and I'll make sure you feel like the most special person in the world and it will get done as when I said it will get done.
yeah,
And that responsiveness is a product feature. You responding in 30 seconds whenever a customer ping you is a product feature because I can
yeah.
assure you don't get that at, the big, an incumbent somewhere else. So yeah, that's how we like to think about it is like at the early stage, yes, the level of service, the speed, the responsiveness, that is a product feature that you have.